For the last 100 years or so, our power grid has been this absolute marvel, right? A huge, complex network that literally powered the modern world. But that marvel is getting old, and the 21st century is throwing a lot at it. Today, we're going to dive into one of the biggest, most important infrastructure shifts of our time, the total transformation of our power grid. And that really gets to the heart of what we're talking about today. Is the grid that did such a great job for the 20th century actually ready for what's coming next? We're talking about a future full of electric cars, solar panels on every roof, and weather that's getting more and more extreme. As you can probably guess, the answer isn't a simple yes or no. And look, we don't have to guess about the strain it's under. Just think back to the Texas blackout in 2021. A wave of extreme weather hit, a few massive centralized power plants went offline, and suddenly millions of people were left in the dark and the freezing cold. It was a brutal wake-up call, a reminder that the system we completely take for granted is actually pretty fragile. Okay, so to really get where we're headed, we've got to understand what we're working with. And for more than a century, our grid has basically worked like a giant one-way highway. This image right here, it shows that old model perfectly. You've got a huge power plant on one end. The electricity it makes travels down these massive transmission lines, then gets sent out through a distribution network, and finally, it shows up at your house so you can turn the lights on. It's all top-down, one direction. Simple. The whole thing was designed for two things: massive scale and consistency. And it worked. It worked incredibly well for a long time. But here's the catch. It has a single point of failure. If you get one big crash on that one-way highway, the entire highway shuts down. But things are changing. A totally new model is starting to take over, one that flips that one-way highway into a kind of bustling city grid with streets going in every direction. Welcome to the decentralized revolution. With this new way of thinking, making power isn't just for the giant utility companies anymore. It's happening right in our neighborhoods, on our rooftops with solar panels, in our communities with local wind turbines, at businesses. It's a bottom-up approach, and that makes the whole system way more flexible and a lot tougher. This table just lays it all out, plain and simple. Take a look at that vulnerability row. The old system is prone to systemic, widespread failure. The new one? You might get an isolated outage, but the whole system doesn't collapse. And then there's the green angle. It is just so much faster and easier to plug renewables like solar and wind into this new kind of grid. And here's a number that, well, it kind of blew my mind when I first saw it: 8%. That's roughly how much electricity generated around the world is just lost while it travels from the power plant to you. It's just gone, vanished into thin air on that long one-way highway. When you generate power closer to home, you pretty much eliminate that waste. But okay, you can't just have millions of little power plants popping up everywhere without some kind of traffic control, right? It would be chaos. You need a digital brain to coordinate the whole shebang. And that, my friends, is where the smart grid comes in. A smart grid is exactly what makes this decentralized dream a reality. Think of it like a nervous system for our energy web. It's using all this tech, sensors, data, AI, to manage a two-way conversation between the people making the power and the people using it, all in real time. And if the smart grid is the brain, then this is the command center. It's called a virtual power plant, or VPP. And no, it's not a single building you can visit. It's a super smart, cloud-based system that links together thousands of different resources, like home batteries, EV chargers, and solar panels, and gets them to act like one single, giant, coordinated power plant. It's the orchestra conductor making sure every instrument is perfectly in tune. All right, so this all sounds great in theory, but is it actually happening? Oh yeah, this isn't science fiction. This revolution is already happening all over the world. Let's take a look at a few places where the future is already here. First stop, Germany. Their Energiewende, which basically means energy transition, has been this massive national project for years. And look at the results. An incredible 46.9% of their electricity now comes from renewables. And a huge chunk of that is decentralized stuff, like community wind farms and rooftop solar. Okay, now let's head down to South Australia, where Tesla's virtual power plant is an absolute game changer. They've connected 50,000 homes that have solar panels and a Powerwall battery. When the grid gets stressed, the VPP can instantly tell all those batteries to feed power back into the system, preventing blackouts. All these little houses are acting together as one giant power station. It's amazing. And for our last stop, let's go to the wind-swept Orkney Islands off the coast of Scotland.
They had a good problem to have. They had so much wind, they could generate way more clean energy than their old grid cables could handle. Building a huge new cable to the mainland was going to cost a fortune, so they had to get creative. They had to get smart. And this is where it gets really cool. They installed a smart grid system that basically acts like an intelligent air traffic controller for electricity. And the results? They were able to connect a ton of new wind turbines to their existing grid. And as this report says, it came at no additional cost for big physical upgrades. They proved you could get smarter instead of just building bigger, more expensive stuff. Okay, let's be real. This isn't a walk in the park. We're talking about revamping a system that's been in place for a century. It's a huge, huge shift, and there are some pretty serious roadblocks we have to navigate. You can pretty much boil the biggest challenges down to these three things. First, the money. This is going to take a massive investment. Second, policy. We need governments to create smart, clear rules of the road for this new energy future. And third, cybersecurity. The smarter and more connected our grid gets, the more tempting of a target it becomes. Just to give you a sense of the scale of that investment piece, $4.5 trillion. Let that number sink in. That's what the International Energy Agency says we need to be investing in clean energy every single year by 2030 to hit our climate targets. It's a staggering amount of money, and it's got to come from both the public and private sectors. And this next part, frankly, it's a little terrifying. This quote comes from a report by the Electric Power Research Institute. Now, WEMPEX systems are the high-tech brains of the smart grid. They're what monitor and control everything. And this report found that most of the standards for these critical systems don't even mention cybersecurity. That's a huge, glaring vulnerability that absolutely has to be fixed.
So what's the big takeaway here? It's not about old grid bad, new grid good. It's not about ripping everything out and starting from scratch. The future is hybrid. It's about weaving this new two-way intelligent network into the old one-way highway, making the whole thing smarter, stronger, and way more resilient.
And that really brings this whole thing back home, to you. Because this isn't just some abstract problem for engineers and politicians to solve. It affects all of us. It's about how we choose to make and use energy right in our own neighborhoods. So the question is your community ready for the Great Grid Reroute?